Well, hello everybody. Welcome to Virtual Thursday Dire Literary Series. And today we have the editor and writers of the anthology Birdbrains, and this is quite an undertaking. We're going to talk about it a little bit later. But we're going to start out with the editor and poet and writer. Introduce Susan Rich. But usually I do bios here, but again, there's a couple of folks here. So what I'm just going to do is show you a copy of the book, so that way you'll know exactly what you're buying later. There it is, and it's a beautiful color, beautiful cover, and a beautiful color. And look at some of those names that are included in here. So check it out. And you can find more information on Susan at poetsusanrich.com. And under books, you can read a little bit about Birdbrain. So, Susan, why don't you take it away?
Okay. Good evening or good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for being here. In the Pacific Northwest, it's a gorgeous day out, and people lose their minds when it stops raining and the sun comes out. Uh, the project, Bird Brains, and I'm not going to really be able to show it to you well because I have this background on. Actually, Erin, would you like move your head for a minute so people will see that? Thank you. That's it. You just saw it. Tim just posted it. It was a project out of love and craziness. So we are going to talk about it a little bit later. So maybe I'll not go into the whole story of where the book came from. And instead, I'm going to introduce first Jennifer Markell and then Erin Murphy, and then I'll read a poem of mine in the book and a favorite. And I've asked each of the contributors to read their poem and to read a favorite, and you can do it in either order and maybe say why you chose the favorite one or what you were doing in your poem or anything you'd like that's relatively connected to birds and poetry. Jennifer Markell has been my friend since I was 9 years old. And that's really fun to say out loud. Um, she was the new girl in fourth grade, and I was braver than I'd ever been. I went up and asked her if I could walk her home or if she knew her way home, and she was kind enough to pretend that she didn't know so that I could walk her. Anyway, we've pretty much both been friends since then and writers. Jennifer has just had her third book of poems, More, accepted by Grayson. And so she and Erin are going to be pressmates. Jennifer has had poems published in so many anthologies and so many places that I'm not going to give you a list. I'm just going to say she's a therapist working out of the Boston area, and she has a great laugh.
Oh,
Jen.
now I'm self-conscious about my laugh. Thank you. Thank you, Susan and Tim and everybody for being here. It's great. The book is great. And every time I pick it up, I sort of fall for another bird and get curious about that bird. And um, I'll start with I'll start with my bird. Um, Susan asked if I would contribute. I picked the catbird, which is not a particularly like pretty bird or exciting bird, but I think because I love cats, um, that was part of what drew me to the catbird, and they're all around. And they're just that meow sound that they make is very intriguing and inviting, and they're just a charming little bird. And I've seen pictures of people kind of getting them to come like right up close over time. They stand off, but then you can get close to them over time, which maybe is like me too. Um, so my poem is called Prayer for the Catbird's Fifth Quill. The longest quill, part of a set of gray feathers that lifts and carries the catbird over leafy thickets, along edges of woods and streams, swamps and brush fields to the backyard feeder where I lure you with mealworms for your whistle and trill, notes you steal from the goldfinch and wren. In the middle of a melody, you sample the croak of a frog, mimic a doorbell, or squawk like an unoiled hinge for the sheer joy of sound. In summer, I listen to you sing late into the evening, your eponymous cat's meow, orchestrated with ringtones and the ratchet of a wind-up toy, an intricate improvisation that will never be repeated. Those who say your color is drab haven't seen the shine of your black cap when you bow in the thorn scrub to attract a mate. Blue-gray, under-gray, wings drooped, tail raised, you reveal your cinnamon patch. I think my cat is entering the picture here. You reveal your cinnamon patch. May you never be bred in an aviary. May you attack a snake with fury. May you move and glide with grace. May your cadences never falter. So that's my catbird. And the other poem that I chose, so many, it took me so long to pick one because I kept saying, yeah, that one, yeah, that one. This one is about the cedar waxwing, and the poem is called The Rules of Play by Catherine Barnett. The Rules of Play. Oh, and why I picked the cedar waxwing. They're beautiful birds. Again, I see them, they're in my world. And the poem is playful, and I found it kind of funny, and I strive to be able to write funny poems, and I think they're challenging for me. So I was drawn to the lightness of this. The Rules of Play. Years before I became a cedar waxwing, a man ordered the pancake special and explained my shortcomings so adroitly I didn't have the wherewithal to get in a word of my own. He lifted the fork to his mouth only, passing no berry to mine, as the waxwing male does to the female, who holds the berry in her beak for a moment and then returns it to the male, who returns it to her, who returns it to him, courtship going on like this until the female either swallows the berry as prelude to the brief cloacal kiss, or just gives it back once and for all. I love berries more than anything, and had he passed me one, I would have devoured it immediately, which is not how the dance goes if dance is initiated by the waxwing, who is so handsome, both male and female, which means I'm beautiful now too. I still don't know how long it's supposed to go on, this restraint, these exchanges. What about appetite? The waitress kept filling my cup. The man kept saying things might have been otherwise had I played at least a little hard to get. Vagrant and without song, said to be of least concern. I am now an intelligent and social bird. To attract me, plant a blueberry bush, a juniper tree. I'll stay until the fruit is gone. There's a raven somewhere who likes to slide down a snowbank on her tail feathers, then climb back up to do it all again. He might prefer someone like that. Waxwings don't play games. A game has no purpose. The cloacal kiss is serious business. At least no games I know, though sometimes in winter, members of my flock and I eat so many fermented berries, whatever's left on the bush, we get a little drunk and fly erratically, completely and incompletely sated, like other inebriates of air. Drunk birds on berries. What's not to love?
Thank you. Those were both so wonderful to hear out loud. One of my first memories of birds is in the town I grew up in. The backyard. The birds would get drunk on the berries, and it would get my mother very upset because there was drunk, raucous partying going on. Jen, I love that you taught me about the catbird, and that one of the projects for this book for me and the science writer is to try to see all the birds in the book that we haven't seen before. And so the catbird is on my list of have to find this year. So thank you. Thank you so much. Erin Murphy is a wizard of a woman, a poet, an editor, now a poet laureate, and a professor and someone who makes magic happen. Um, I have only met Erin in person once, but I believe before we met in person, she found me a castle in France. So I'm just going to leave that. There's so much to admire about Erin and admire about her work. So she is the author of many books. I have more than a dozen, it says here, and poetry, essays, and an editor of several anthologies. So she was one of my inspirations for this book. Take it away, Erin.
Thank you so much, Susan. And thank you for editing a collection of poems that I think we didn't realize we needed, but we really do right now. It's so wonderful to hear all of these amazing poems about birds. So that's a good transition about the drunk birds, because my poem from BIRDBRAINS is also about drunk birds. It's called Flying Under the Influence in Issaquah, and it's a cento. And I'm sure I don't need to explain this to anybody who's here, but just in case there's someone out in the streaming verse that needs to know, a cento is a poem made up entirely of lines from poems by other poets. So when I'm done reading, I'll drop the credits for my cento in the chat so you can see those. Flying Under the Influence in Issaquah, a cento, and I would like to dedicate this reading to my niece, Joanna, who's graduating from high school this spring, and she was born in Issaquah. It has an epigraph. American robins get tipsy from feeding on fermented fruit. That's from the Seattle Times. The robin is the one inside the perfect ferment. Rotten fruit, once red, now spider spit gray, intact but empty, savory and bitter. Berries dripping with wine put his head into a state of chronic query. He is all pulse and membrane in the wobbly pirouette between song. Cheerily, cheer up, cheer up. Dazed, drunk, still lurching into something. This warm place, this bright and restless carousel, wings unfurled. Cheerily, cheer up, cheer up. Secret code of everlasting joy and sorrow. A little project called Loving the World. And then the other poem that I'm going to share is by Kelly Russell Agaddon. And it's a poem that I love. I mean, I love so many of the poems, like Jennifer, I love so many of the poems in this anthology. I just popped those cento credits over into the chat. So it's hard to choose, but I'm going to read this poem called No Deer Were Injured in the Writing of This Poem. Like the chickadee-dee-dee, they were named for their song. Killdeer, killdeer, a high shriek across a sapphire sky, or a single song in the dark. Ground nester. In the sand dunes, the high grass, spring becomes a season of threats. Beachcomber with black lab, coyote, raccoons, foxes, crows, and gulls. Dear chattering plover, dear noisy plover, your call is your calling card. Your name is so misleading, killdeer, so harsh, as if Bambi is ready to be slain in the forest. Though you are not a hunter, but a protector. Like when danger approaches your nest, you fake a broken wing so the stray cat follows what looks to be an injured bird across the gravel road, across the meadow, gone from the nest you built. And once far away, your faux broken wing act ends. The cat begins to pounce on your small body, and like that, you take flight. Precocial chicks safe, a cat left perplexed, your call a bubbling trill across the blue, laughter echoing above the shore. Thanks for listening.
Thank you so much. And it's so fun to have Issaquah there and to know that it's for your niece. I'm going to read, I don't need to introduce myself. I'm going to just read two poems, a favorite and my one poem in here. I'll start with the favorite. One of the things I've been aware of is how much humor is in the book, just as Jen said. There's also a lot of sexiness in these birds, but I'll let you discover that. I'm going to go for the humor. This poem is called Ode to the Harlequin Duck by Caitlin Hibbard. My dear Historonicus, Historonicus, your name means actor, means drama, means something over the top. O winged warrior, you choose the roughest waters, rocks pounding the surf, pounding you, sometimes breaking your bones. Yet you boys have the coolest dance moves, tail raised, neck stretched, always the court jester, bobbing your head, so we have to consider that unmistakable face. Even your migration is weird, east-west instead of north-south like the other ducks. And I love how you swim and wing your way against the current, following each bend of the river, flying low, never just taking the easy way home. It's funny how when I heard these poems read aloud, I realized so much more about them than when I was just kind of editing. And this is the northern flicker. This is the bird that I chose. When I sent people lists of what was available, I kept this bird off the list and for myself. The northern flicker reconsidered. If a bird could become a poem, and why not, promenade through wayward stanzas, lift their couplets of wings, what then? A high wicka wicka alchemical spell, a cry of the private and unprintable. Could a flicker know heartbreak, practice self-restraint? Their fashion leans bold, polka dots and stripes, bright cinnamon to morning fog hues. The male handsome with his patch of mustache. I'd like to become their lifelong mate. Should I return as a bird, a celebrated shad spirit, cotton rump, with the longest bird tongue in North America. This ode to plurality, this epic, boundless, then cross-stitched together on the pages of a Northwest sky. Thanks, everybody.
I'm going to just keep Susan on for a little bit, and then I'll bring in Jennifer and Aaron. So I want to talk about the editing process of this book. You've got paintings by Hiroseki. You have notes and poems and stories and memoir, and it's about 340 pages. So this thing is a monster. So how difficult was it to edit?
It was a project. I think of it as being three-dimensional, and there were three of us collaborating. So the art I find stunning by Hiroko Seiki, and I would meet with her, and she would have three or four drawings, gesture drawings, sumi drawings, the Japanese pen and ink. And she'd say, Susan, which of the eagles do you want? Which is kind of an amazing thing. She did over 110 pieces of art for this book. And I'd be like, Hiroko, you're the artist. She'd, no, you're the boss. You choose the art. So that was one of the most exciting and glorious parts of this whole project was getting to work with her. And I'd say, Hiroko, if there's anything where you would prefer a certain northern flicker to what I've chosen, and she didn't once do that. So that part was super easy. The bird notes, the science notes by Stephanie Delaney. She is a longtime friend of mine. I like to say our friendship spans 25 years. And she took ownership of that. And I worked with her a bit on the editing of it, but most of it was her work. And the surprise, Tim, was that I actually did a fair bit of editing on the poems, and I hadn't really expected to do that, but I started out the book thinking, oh gosh, I hope I don't lose any friends over this book. This, so many people who sent their work in were people I knew. But by the time I got to the end of the process, I was like, I just want this to be the best book I can possibly make. And anyone who's a poet and sends their work out knows professionally that, it doesn't get taken every time and how much of this is all subjective. I loved working with the poets on their work. I hope I was sensitive when I asked for changes or suggested changes. Um, as far as I know, we didn't come to blows with anyone. And the other part of that, because the editing process is sort of all the stuff, was how did people end up in the book? So there were democratic calls that went out to everybody from Raven Chronicles Press. They had it on their website for many months. Anybody could send work in. We worked with poets who work in the hospitals, trying to get poems from children who might otherwise not be in the book. And then I asked friends, I asked people I knew. We realized that birds do not care about borders. They are not worried about nationalism or states' rights. So that meant anyone was fair game. I think most people, 80% of the people in the book, have a real connection to Washington State, and others might have, visited for an AWP or been planning to visit. So that wasn't it's not only Washington State writers, as you can tell from Ellen Bass, Carolyn Forche, Ted Kuzer. As far as I know, they haven't lived in Washington, but it was fun to include all my favorites. It's lovely to hear people say how it's hard for them to choose a favorite. And I always say to people, this is the book where like every poem in the book is my favorite. Like, how cool is that?
Briefly describe how you got the idea for this. Did you have a eureka moment? Was it just a couple you sitting around with a friend thinking, like, how did this come to be?
Yeah, great question. I was in a coffee shop and I have it documented. It was sort of the beginning of 4th of July weekend 2 years ago, so pretty recently. And I was looking for a new project. I had just come back from doing a book tour with my book Blue Atlas, which is basically a personal surreal narrative of a midterm abortion. So being on the road with that did not bring a lot of joy to most people. It was important, but it wasn't joyful. And I really wanted something collaborative. I felt that there were a lot of anthologies happening at the moment, perhaps because so many print journals are no longer print journals, that anthologies are kind of taking that over in a bit. So I have in my notebook a line that says something like, matching birds with poets. Would anyone be interested? And here's the amazing thing. Not only were they interested, but from that idea in my head that I wrote in my journal in a coffee shop by myself, a month later, I had a signed contract to start the project going. Like that'll
Amazing.
never happen in my life again, right? Like I'm sure people here know, does a month is crazy.
So yeah, I've worked and I've edited anthologies before, and it's, believe me, it's not an easy task. Timelines get messed up, and forgive me for doing this. I'm adding these folks, and they have nothing to do with this question. They're not guilty in any way. Tell me about the promptness of your contributors in terms of like hitting the target dates, deadlines.
I have to say that I was lucky. Most of the poets, including the two poets here, were super prompt and easy to work with and got all excited about the project. One of the things that was somewhat unique about this was that over, I'd say again, over 80%, probably more, wrote new poems because it had to be bird centered. You couldn't just be like, I'm looking out the window with my tea and a raven flies by and I think of death. Like that wasn't going to work. So for the most part, it's brand new poems. There was, I'm not going to name, there was one person that I thought, okay, if this person doesn't come through, I have a backup plan. But most people were incredibly kind and generous, maybe because it was summertime when the deadlines were. So academic schedules had a little bit more time. Um, yeah, it was actually not bad at all. And the funny part was how many people were fine with being edited and even asked me to edit them. And I think that's because the poems were so new, right? Normally we might have a poem in a drawer on on a computer, few months, show it to your poetry or your writing group, sit with it, talk to your dog or cat about it. But this was faster. And so I felt really honored that people trusted me that way and for the most part went with my edits. And um, yeah, I was lucky with the poets. They were great. They're all great.
So this book, you have four Washington State Poet Laureates, including Erin. You had three Pulitzer Prize winners. So I have a question for Jennifer and Erin. Did you guys know exactly what you were getting into? And I don't mean that in an evil way. Like, how was the communication with the editor and you? Like, was it just, hey, I wrote this poem, I sent it in, and it was done? Or were you involved in the process at all?
Do you want to go first, Jennifer?
I'm trying to remember. I think I chose the bird and she said sure. And then I, started with my usual, well, not usual, but sometimes I just do free writing. It was like, everything about the catbird, like everything. And then it eventually came to be more of a poem. I did have time to bring it to my writing group, which was great. And then I brought it to Susan and she said, it's more than 23 lines. Something's got to go here. She chopped off the end, which actually my writing group, I think, had said also, but I was like attached to it. But then, okay, writing group said it's got to go. Susan said it's got to go. So it's got to go. And that made it a stronger poem. But I don't remember any difficulties with the process, really. It was hard to write on demand. I don't do that very often, like, oh no, I said I would do this. I've got 28 days to come up with a poem about a catbird. But I just kind of went with the process and it came together.
How about you, Aaron?
Yeah, so Susan and I had been chatting about anthologies in general, and of course, as she mentioned, she had publicized the call for submissions widely. So at a certain point, um, I checked with her about what birds were left, and I was really surprised that the robin was left. I thought the robin would be one of the first ones to be taken, the American robin. But the robin was left, and so I love writing centos. I have a chapbook of centos called Fields of Ache that's a free download on Ghost City Press on their website if anybody's interested in centos. And so this is a good opportunity, especially if you do, like Jennifer said, if you're writing something sort of like, on demand. Ascento is a good way to kind of get into that because you can start looking for lines that would lend themselves to the poem. And in my case, it started with this idea from the epigraph. I remembered reading this article about robins getting drunk on fermented fruit. And so I decided, I wanted to create this poem about robins kind of joyfully stumbling around inebriated. And then, because my niece was born in Issaquah and my brother and his family lived in Issaquah, and I spent a lot of time visiting them out there, it just kind of fit really well with this particular theme to set the poem there. And I liked picturing the robins stumbling around in their yard, drunk.
So, Aaron, let me ask you a question about a cento. When you're writing a cento, do you say, I'm going to sit down and write a cento now? Or when you start the cento, how do you research it? Do you go by memory in other words, like you would think, oh, gee, Maya Angelou wrote this poem, Caged Bird, and you find it and any of these lines work. How do you go about the process? Because I could imagine for me, it would involve some Googling, some direct memories, some grabbing a book and flipping through it. So how did you go about this one?
Yeah, there's a lot of Googling, but I would say that for me, and it's probably different for everybody who writes centos, but for me, I kind of have an idea of what I want the image to be, and then I go looking for some possibilities that will fit, that image. So if I want to describe, the particular fruit or something, I'm going to look for everything I can find, all the available images I can find that are related to the fruit. Um, and it might take a long time before I find one that works perfectly for the poem. And then of course, if you're going to have enjambment, if you're going to have a line run into another line, they also have to work together.
Yeah.
And so that's really the challenge too. You can have a bunch of lines that you love, but if they don't make any sense,
Still has
running
to
one
make a
into the
poem.
other.
Yeah.
Right, right. So that's part of the challenge too. I love the challenge of it. It's problem solving, kind of building a poem. I think all poems are problem solving and we're always building poems. We're just not as aware of it as we are when we're creating a cento.
So Jennifer, you basically said you don't like writing from prompts or writing on demand. So when you wrote your poem to submit to this anthology, um, what was your process? Did you have to take yourself out of the fact that it was a prompt? Did your poem end up going sideways at any time? Tell me a little bit about that.
I actually do like prompts. I just don't like deadlines. And this was a deadline. Like she'd said, next year sometime, and then I had no pressure, but there was a certain pressure to come up with a poem and complete it. Um,
How long does it usually take you to complete a poem that you're really satisfied with?
oh gosh, sometimes you get these lucky little hits now and then where basically the poem writes itself. Those are gifts that don't happen very often. I'd say very rarely. Sometimes it's weeks, months. I have some that I put aside and then I look at them again. It's like, oh, what the heck was that poem? And it's like, oh, I know exactly what this needs now. I know why it wasn't working because I'm not trying so hard. I've got some space around it. Um, But no, I just tried to give myself a lot of freedom. And I was like, if I don't come up with something, I've known Susan since I was 9. She's not going to kill me. If I say I couldn't get a catbird, I'm sorry. The anthology will go on without me. But when you love the subject, and I do love birds, and I think anybody who pays attention to birds falls in love with birds. So it was so focused just to conjure everything I could think of and feel about this chattery bird that mimics other things. It's like, why do they do that? That is just so interesting. Um,
Great
yeah.
stuff. Awesome poem of yours too. I'm going to end the questioning with Susan. So I guess Jennifer is saying that having a deadline puts some pressure on her. So my question to you, Susan, is did you write your poem after reading other people's poems that you loved so much that were your favorites? And did that put pressure on you to rise to that level?
Mm, a great question. Um, I think I started writing mine fairly early. I should say that the call for poems was probably about 5 or 6 months, but it might have been that a lot of people, like at the beginning, I didn't know I'd have people from Pennsylvania and Massachusetts, so they definitely didn't get that full amount of time. I think both Erin and Jen were more towards like, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, how can you do it? So I didn't want to compare my poem to other poems because I wanted everything to be really different, but I did feel pressure because I was editing. And so I thought, Poet X, who I've asked to take out these lines and change this, is going to be like, oh, yeah, well, your poem's not so great. So I felt like I needed to do my best to really step up. I didn't show the poem to anyone before it got published, which is pretty unusual. I could have brought it to my writing group, but many people in the writing group are in the book, so it was kind of a little incestuous in that way. But I do remember, Jen, you said something to me when I'm like, "Oh, the catbird. What do you were telling me about the catbird. I didn't know it." And when I kind of suggested that maybe you'd like to write for this anthology, I don't know if you remember this, but my memory is that you were worried that because we'd been friends since we were 9 years old, that I was going to take your poem no matter what. And you were like, promise me you'll reject it if it's not good enough. And I was like, I promise you I will do that. And clearly that was not a problem. But
Yeah.
um, it was very interesting because I think anybody, I don't know if this was true for you, Timothy, where you do a poetry anthology and you're part of this community, of course you're going to know most of the people. I was always so excited when I accepted something where I'd never heard of the person. I was like, all right, this is virginal, this is pure. But mostly I had heard of people and did know them from something.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Susan and Erin and Jennifer. And again, let's take a. Let me take you to the book's cover. It's obviously the work. It's a beautiful book. You've heard some beautiful work out of this book, and I must say this book is available anywhere that you can. And if you can't find it in your favorite store, and you don't like Amazon, ask your favorite store to order it. I'm sure they can, and there it is again. So check it out, A Lyrical Guide to Washington State Birds, and there's a little bit of everything in here, but there's sounds like there's some wonderful, and you've heard some wonderful, wonderful work. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, now folks that are watching the stream that are not in the Zoom room, thank you so much for watching the stream. And if you'd like to be part of the open mic, we're going to let you in. So please use that link for the room, and we'll certainly let you in. Thanks again, you guys. And yeah.